Awaken, kingdom culture, where hearts and minds come alive, one story at a time. My name is Ken Karcher, and I am your host. Along with me today is my son, Austin Karcher, the co-host. Good morning, Austin. How are you?
Good, Dad. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good. I'm excited to be with you and spend some time with our listeners. I know in our last podcast, we talked a lot about ourselves and shared our story. And today we're going to get into hopefully having our listeners think about where they are in their story. But before we get there, I thought we'd just kick around some of the sporting news of this week because there's been a lot happening. What do you think about the retirement of Nick Saban?
Well, he's arguably one of the greatest to ever do it. So it's being in Alabama, it's hard to see him go. He's done a great job, and I really look up and respect to what he's done as a coach, but also what he's done for our culture, our football culture, and just how he's treated people along the way. What about you? What do you think?
Oh, it's amazing is the domino effect that happened because of his retirement. You know, just to name a few, you look at, they had a hire replacement for him, which I don't know if I would wish that on anybody, but they hired Kalen DeBoer out of Washington. So that opens up Washington. They hired Jed Fish from Arizona. That opens up Arizona. You know, and it's just this constant domino effect in the world of sports. And I think in the midst of that, we tend to forget the lives that get affected. You know, you look at the head coach, but there's all the assistants that maybe were loving it at Alabama and loving it at Washington and Arizona. All of a sudden they're displaced because maybe they're not taken with the coach at his new position, or the new coach that comes in doesn't keep them. And there's just a lot of uncertainty and upheaval in all of the people's lives involved. Then you add in the kids. I mean, you've experienced that, and all of a sudden you're leaving your school, your friends, and yes, it might look better on paper that dad's making more money or taking a better job, but there's just still a lot of things that go through the hearts and minds of people. You know, I read something the other day I thought was really interesting, and they talked about, all of Saban's success, but they said, in a matter of 48 hours, there's someone new sitting in his chair. There's someone new wearing the Alabama logo. And here he is, not forgotten, but he won't be looked at the same in the months and years to come. But where you never lose your impact will be on your home, your marriage, your children. And that's ultimately, where he'll leave his lasting legacy outside of Alabama football. There's a lot of talk this week about Jim Harbaugh, possibly leaving Michigan. And what do you think about that move?
Well, I know for years now he's been trying to maybe get back in the NFL. I know one of his goals is to win a Super Bowl, and he was so close, but his own brother beat him. So I could see it happening. He finished on top in college football, and now he's got an opportunity to get back into the highest level of football and maybe reach some of those goals.
And then last week on Monday, it's referred to as Black Monday in the NFL. There were 7 head coaches that were let go. There's still 3 more that they're kicking around. There's the Dallas debacle, and Jerry Jones was about to have a heart attack, it looked like, in his box the other night. You got the Eagles, who were hot as could be last year, and all of a sudden this year they're talking about the coach being fired. And then the whole thing in Pittsburgh with Mike Tomlin, who's never had a losing season, and people were talking about, should he be let go? Should he walk away? But you got everyone from Arthur Smith in Atlanta. You've got Rivera in Washington, Staley at the Chargers, Vrabel at Tennessee. But the 2 biggies, the same day, within a 24-hour period as Saban, Pete Carroll and Bill Belichick. Give me your thoughts on all that.
Oh, gosh. Well, for me personally, it's a sad day almost because, these people were, big fixtures in my life. I've grown up around football, and these are people that you look up to and that have won, most of the championships over the last 20-some years. To me, I look at it as a shift in culture, in the football culture. One of the things that you're starting to see is, people value youth over age and wisdom, and then Also it's just you're only as good as your last performance because these are good coaches. They've done a
Yeah.
good job over a long period of time, and consistency is the hardest thing to do in anything that is performance based. So these are good coaches that it's just the tough thing about sports, and so for me, I look at it mostly as a sad day.
Now, you mentioned that word culture, which is in our podcast title, which we'll be talking about again many, many times. But then there was the playoffs, and I heard a rumor. I heard a rumor from my wife last night that the leader in our playoff picks that we made as a family is little Remy Ruski, our 2-year-old. Is that true?
Yeah, I'm a little ashamed. Someone who is in this profession has, loved football his whole life, only can pick two NFL games correct, and my 2-year-old daughter, gonna be 3, is 6-0 after week one. So, it definitely humbles me quite a bit. So, but it was a fun weekend of football, and that's why you love the playoffs. You love to see, two teams that have earned that spot, but they got to come out and perform no matter the weather, no matter the time, no matter the excuse. It's all about that one day.
Well, let's talk about this week's games and just get our quick picks for this week. We got Texans, Ravens. Who you taking?
I went against the Texans last time, but I'm going to have to do it again. I mean, the Ravens have been playing some of the best football of late, so I believe the Ravens are going to come out in that game.
I think the Ravens obviously have them at home. On paper, you would think it's going to be them. I know C.J. Stroud, he's the hot quarterback. A good buddy of mine's the O-line coach at the Ravens, Joe D'Alessandris. I'm with you, though. I'm going to go with the Ravens. How about Kansas City at Buffalo? Another snow game.
Yes. Once again, that's why you want to win during the regular season, so you can bring them to your cold atmospheres. Now, Kansas City obviously was cold last week, but what's been interesting is Patrick Mahomes. This is, I think, is his first,
Yes.
playoff game that's, not a home game. So I'm actually going to go with Buffalo here. I think, although the Chiefs look probably the best they've looked, I just think there were so many injuries on the Dolphins' defense that, I'm still not sold on how consistent the Chiefs' offense is going to be. So I think Buffalo is going to pull this one out.
I'm with you. I think Buffalo at home. Josh Allen is quite a quarterback. Nothing against Mahomes or the Chiefs, but I'm with you in Buffalo. Let's go to the NFC. We got Green Bay. Jordan Love was unbelievable against the Cowboys. Green Bay versus San Francisco out in the Bay Area.
I think San Francisco, they've been knocking on the door of a Super Bowl for a few years now. I personally love their style of play and what they do offensively and how they've built their organization. I think that 49ers are going to win this week, and then I think they'll probably be my Super Bowl pick.
Well, Brock Purdy, who's had a wonderful year. I know the one game at the end of the year they were touting him as possibly MVP. He ended up not playing well, but he's had a great year. Kyle Shanahan's head coach, his dad Mike was actually my coach one year in Denver, and I'm with you there too. I think that the Packers were a surprise last week, but I look for the 49ers to get it done at home in San Francisco. Then the team I'm rooting for the most, we have the Detroit Lions, hard to believe, and the Bucks beat the Eagles. So what a surprise game. Bucks at Detroit. Who you taking?
I'm going to go with the Lions. Obviously I graduated from Eastern Michigan. I've actually went to a Monday night game in that stadium. It was loud then when they were not very good, and now that they're good, I can only imagine what that playoff atmosphere is going to be like. Not to mention, I've been really impressed with how Dan Campbell has been able to build that culture from the ground up. And obviously they were not very good the first year he was there, but they trusted the process, and he's really shifted their culture to a winning style of play.
I'm a fan of Dan as well. I think you, again, hit that word culture. And, I happened to catch, I think, one of the interviews, it might have been this morning or last night, but, it showed him breaking down and being really emotional. And once again, emotion is a big part of not only football, but our life. And that transparency and vulnerability from a head coach to his players and the fans and even the media, it makes you want to gravitate to that guy. And that's a lot of what we're going to try to draw out here in our podcast, Awaken Kingdom Culture. So we'll see how those games turn out, and I think that it'll be interesting as we move forward. It'll be interesting to see what happens with some of these hires. But all that said, I thought it was a great segue into what we're going to talk about today, because these types of things affect our lives. And we're going to get into that in a minute. But I wanted to ask our audience a question to consider. How many of you are tired, weary, and brokenhearted? Are you tired of comparing yourself to maybe that social mask of the person standing next to you? Are you searching for your identity in the eyes of other people? Well, if you need to hear some good news and find a place of rest, I'm going to ask you to join us as we do this podcast each week, because I believe that will help you as we walk through life find that place that you can call home and a place of rest. So a question, Austin, that I've asked many people throughout the years, especially coaches that would come into my office, and we would sit down, and especially if I knew them, but I'd ask this question: how are you? I mentioned that question in our last podcast about when I asked this lady in a church one time and she voiced that she was terrible. The typical answer when that question's asked, how are you, is fine, good, better off than I deserve. And there might be a day that that's the case. Nothing wrong with that. But there's also those days when that is not the case. And I've often said to coaches after they've answered me, I said, well, now that you're done lying, how you really doing?
Right.
So let's take some time to talk about some maybe questions that'll, help others think through that question of how are you?
Yeah, so for me, I look at that question, how are you, as very important. Okay, if you can't be honest, with where you are, you're going to have a trouble getting to that place of healing, because that's really the first step. Is you got to ask yourself, how are you? So in order to heal, you got to be honest and accept the circumstances that you're currently sitting in.
Mm-hmm.
You have to be able to assess and test your foundation that you've built, as those circumstances come. The foundation of your belief systems, like I kind of shared last time, have you built your foundation on the sand, or have you built your foundation on the rock? To me, when you ask the question, how are you, you're really asking 4 questions in one. You're asking, how are your circumstances? How do you feel about those circumstances? And how do others perceive you in the midst? And how do you perceive yourself in those circumstances? So,
Wow.
As we kind of get into this exercise where we're asking the question, how are you? What we're trying to do here is we're going to just kind of go through 20 or so questions, and I know me and you are going to kind of answer them of how they have have shown up in our lives, and maybe how we felt or perceived things during those times. But for you as listeners, what we're asking you to do is ask these questions to yourself. Ask yourself how you felt in that circumstance, or ask yourself, how did others perceive you, or how you perceived yourself. So let's get into it. We'll start with the first question is, have you ever won a game or won all your games? And I'll answer that question first. I was able to, win a great number of games throughout my career. And there's been two seasons as a quarterback that we were able to win all of our games. My sophomore and junior year, we won all of our games. And to me, it's a great feeling. You feel on top of the world. You feel confident. You feel like you cannot be beaten. And, I'm sure the way I was perceived was, I was, some people might have been jealous, but for the most part, I felt respected, for what I did and all the hard work that I put in.
Probably called a winner too.
Yep.
I can't, the thing I can't say, Austin, I've never had that. I've never been on an undefeated team. So that's a great accomplishment for your high school team as a sophomore and a junior. That's for sure.
Well, thanks. It was definitely a great time in my life. The second question would be, have you lost a game or have you lost all your games? Obviously as I had some games where I've won, I've also lost quite a bit. I'm currently walking through, a difficult season this past season. So, what about you? Have you ever experienced this?
Well, I think anybody that's in sports obviously is going to have won a game and have lost a game. And but I have to say the part that I don't want to say, I've been a part of two teams that have not won any games. You were on one of those. Well, I think you were, yeah, at Eastern Michigan. You haven't come yet.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. But so you missed out on all that fun. But we went 0-12 at Eastern Michigan, and that was not a fun year. And coaches that I'm sure have been a part of a team like that know what comes with that as an assistant coach. So that was difficult. And then this past year, I helped the local high school out, Albertville High School here in Alabama, and we ended up going 0-12, or 0-10, I should say, in high school. But what was so amazing about this year was, I want to share with our audience, our team received a Facebook post after the season, and it was from a parent, not a football parent. It was actually from a band parent. And this is what they said in their post that I thought was really relevant for us as an audience. It said, seeing a friend of mine get emotional tonight for the senior football players makes me proud. He gets it. It's more than winning a game, so much more. The football season, despite our 0-10 record, here's the kicker, was phenomenal. It's hard to explain unless you've lived it. Thank you, coaches, for everything. You have taught these boys life lessons that they'll never forget. I'm praying this coaching staff sticks together for years. Well,
wow.
I mean, I was blown away. So I reached out to that person. I just said in a quick text back, you get it. She understood what it really means to win, even in the midst of a loss. And we're going to talk about a lot of that as we go through as well. So 0-12 and 0-10, 2 times for this guy.
The next one, you ready for this? Have you won a championship? So for me,
I can say yes. I can say yes. Twice. I won a high school baseball championship, and I won a World Bowl championship in NFL Europe.
Awesome. Well, that World Bowl one was very special to me as well. I was a little, 9-year-old, I think, at the time, and, the smells of, just the stands. I mean, people were drunk, so the smell of beer to this day still smells good. And just the sounds of, we are the champion playing after the game, and the candles that were lit. I mean, it was just a great feeling watching you win that championship. For me, I was able to win a state championship on those 2 undefeated seasons. In 2004 and 2005, we won our state championship. Oh, that's a great feeling to feel on top of, whatever, level you're playing at. All right, so the next one would be, have you ever lost the championship?
Yes, I have lost one, and I hate to say it because it's the biggie, Super Bowl 22. With all the elation that goes into getting into the Super Bowl, there's nothing like losing the Super Bowl. Such finality, and wow, it was just not a memory that I want to keep. I wish I would have been on the winning end, but we lost the Super Bowl.
It's funny you said that because my Abel, was going in today, and he's talking about something historical. So I had one of your cups that had the Super Bowl 22 Denver Broncos on there, and we talked about the fumble and all that stuff that you were a part of. So for me, I lost a 6th grade baseball championship with the Wittens, and then I lost a freshman 2003 state championship as a freshman, like I said, and then I lost a bowl game in college as well. So that's me losing a championship.
I think if you coach long enough, you're going to, that's why the questions are so important, because it relates to everybody. If you're going to coach or play, you're going to lose a game, you're going to win games, you're going to have a chance to maybe have undefeated seasons, you're going to not have undefeated seasons, you're going to have a chance to win champion, to lose champion. All those things are part of life. And that's where we're getting at as we continue through these thoughts and questions. But how do you live out this faith that we have in the midst of all that? Those emotions, as you've talked before, they're real, they're down here, but how do we filter them through what's true up here? Two questions that I want to propose that have, again, been a big part of my life that I'm not really liked because they're not fun. But have you ever waited for that phone to ring? Maybe one of these guys today that's, out of a job, he's waiting for that phone to ring and he's sitting there and you feel alone. Or maybe the thought of you've experienced no return call. Even if it's a no, I know this. I just want someone to say, you're not getting the job. But don't drag it out and you sit there with a maybe. We have such poor communication as coaches in reference to treating each other the way we need to be treated. We tend to forget, I think, when you're on the other end. So how about you, Austin? You ever wait on that phone to ring or not got that call back you were hoping to get?
Oh, absolutely. Like I've stated in the last podcast, I have aspirations of being a head coach, and I've had some opportunities of taking next steps, and but in that waiting process, oh gosh, you feel out of control. You feel out of control. Like, oh, if I just send this one more email, or if I try to check in and see how it's going, it's like you just got to sit there and wait. It's very difficult. I've also felt, times where, like you said, I haven't gotten a return phone call. You feel disrespected and unseen and like not of any value for, at least getting a call saying, hey, you're not our guy. The next
how
one.
About, before you go on, how about this one? I know you've heard this before in your young career, and a lot of coaches have. They tell you, you don't have any experience. Well, no kidding. I've never been a head coach. How am I going to get experience? I remember my Uncle Jer, who was my high school football and baseball coach, telling that story. He was trying to get his first coaching job in high school way back, when he was a young man, and he went in to interview. It was actually for a wrestling job, and he's a football, baseball guy, and they said to him, well, you don't have any experience. And he about lost it. He says, well, no kidding. He said, but give me a chance. And that's what I know you need, and we're praying for that as well. Go ahead. What were you going to say, Austin, number 7?
Oh, no, but on that point, it's like what's interesting, Dad, is, at the highest level of football with people that are around the same age, they get younger and younger coaches. And at the lower levels, it's almost like, it's, you look for the older coaches. That's interesting to me. But anyways, so the next question would be, have you ever sold a house or lived apart? What
For
would
me,
you say?
Our family, 22 moves since I left college. And you've experienced a lot of them, 22.
Yeah, I've lived in because of, your career, I've lived in 11 different states, and as well as Europe, and then me in the coaching profession, I've lived in 3 apartments, 1 rental, and 2 houses. So, I'm just starting and trying to catch up to you, I guess.
Did you search for any new schools?
My kids are currently homeschooled, and they've done the hybrid model. So, once, but we're getting into that phase.
We've had 6, right? You had 6 with my crazy career.
Yes. What about experiencing financial strain through the profession?
I think all coaches would say that there's been a time they've sat across the table, and I know salaries now are just becoming astronomical, and really they're generational in regards to wealth for your future if you get one of these jobs. But for most of us in my age, you didn't make this kind of money, and so sitting around the table and saying, what are we going to do? We only have this amount of money. So there's always those financial strains that are concerns for all families.
Yeah, I mean, obviously you struggle, that you have parts of your, when you're young and you got a lot of kids. I mean, you go in and out of debt, you feel tight and you feel stuck sometimes, like you can't go out of the house because we don't have the money to do that. So, it really becomes a worry, and I know it's tough on me, but I know it's been really tough on my wife at times, who stays home. I mean, she does so much for our family, and she stays home with the kids and just feeling stuck, like I can't just go to Chick-fil-A for the day because we got to get to the end of the month or whatever. So
it's like you said, Austin, they always talk about the coach and the focus is on the coach, but it's the wife. it's the children. There's a lot more people involved than just the coach.
Absolutely. So have you ever stuffed your true emotions?
Yes. And for not the right reasons. Many times I've stuffed my emotions because it was the Christian look that I wanted to make sure people saw, as you talked about how people might perceive us earlier. Or it's the professional thing to do, or take the high road I was taught as a young man. And I do believe that those are the right reasons, other than trying to do it just because you're the Christian. But there is a place that we need to be able to be confrontational, yet do it in a way that is beneficial for both parties. But yeah, I've done that.
Yeah. Obviously, I'm your son, so I'm built a lot like you, and I've been trained to be always professional and take the high road. So that has been something that I dealt with, and some of my struggles have been because I haven't found that right outlet to express some of those emotions. Because I mean, I felt them, regardless of whether they were true or right or whatever. I mean, some of the things I had to go through was because I had to express them, But like you said, I mean, you always need to be respectful and treat people well in the midst of addressing issues that come up.
Well, I think what's important, though, is what you just said, and it's why we are doing the podcast, right? We said, how did we get here last week? Well, it was our conversations at the end of the day. So our outlet as a father and son has been to be able to share with each other as you go home from work of what's going on in life. And I encourage that for all of our listeners that are in situations where they need to have an outlet to talk about what's on their heart.
Yeah. The next one would be, have you ever struggled with depression?
Boy, I wish we didn't have to address that. But yes, I personally have had a mild bout, which I think was circumstantial. But really, where I have suffered from depression, it's been in the lives of others in our home and in my extended family, and feeling no control, not able to help them in any way. And as a football coach and former player, to not have control is not something you like.
No. Yeah, for me, in college, like I said, when we ended up moving my junior year in high school to Virginia, or from Virginia to Georgia, I put a lot of pressure on myself. Like I talked about the other day, I wanted to redeem your name, but also, be the greatest quarterback ever to play. So as you can imagine, when you put that type of pressure, and obviously you have good moments, but then you have difficult moments as well. I fell into a depression, and towards the middle of my college years, I felt lost. I lost hope. I was, struggled with passion, and just kind of going, what's my purpose? What am I trying to do? And that's definitely something I had to work through, for sure.
Well, the mental health issues of life, but in sports, is becoming more and more apparent, and we've definitely got to find some answers for people. We think that obviously the answer is the one who made us, but it's tough. It's tough for people, and I know I talked to a lot of people from the Awakening that have called in that have those types of issues. So I'm going to put a couple of these together as I think they fit together. Have you ever asked, why not me? Why him?
Yeah. Well, yes. Obviously we always think higher of ourselves. That's natural. But you look and see, and you there's many a times as a coach or as a player, I said, why did that quarterback get the chance and I didn't? Or as a coach, I'm saying, why is he getting promoted when I'm doing all this? And it's just one of those things that's I'm sure everybody deals with that.
I have a good friend who I hope we'll have on this podcast, but for years I've worked with him, and he's always said, oh, you belong in the NFL. You should get an NFL job. And I haven't, for whatever reason, had that opportunity. I've coached in NFL Europe. But, his encouragement in a way was almost harmful because it made me ask that question more often than not of, why that person? Why not me? So that's something I know goes through a lot of our minds when we're in this job cycle, and it's not easy. Now, here's some other ones. How about, has anyone struggled with contentment, struggled with anger, or bitterness?
Yeah, for me, I've struggled with, the current role that I have, not being, you know, I always wanting more, and your focus is on, well, I got to get to here to get to here to get to here. Well, the struggle with that is if you're
Mm.
constantly thinking ahead and grass is greener somewhere else, you're not pouring yourself in the moments and the people that are sitting right in front of you. You know, as far as struggles with anger and bitterness, um, I've been frustrated with maybe opportunities I've gotten, or I felt like I've been lied to or, mistreated, or even, some failures that, I've, had to go through along the way.
Well, like you, Mom has often said to me, you're never content and always looking for the next thing. And it's definitely something that I think all of us work through. And our contentment doesn't come from a position or a job. It comes from, once again, within, who is in, and that union we have with Him. And so it's definitely a process. It's something that many of us work through, if not all of us. Here's a question that maybe you've whispered, maybe you don't want to admit as people think this through. I can't do this anymore.
I've definitely had that question, um, many a times, and up until this point, I've stayed the course and kept going. But it's it's definitely a question that creeps in your mind as things get difficult.
Yeah, and unfortunately, some people that are whispering that, it's regards to life and death. And once again, hopefully our podcast can help people not have to come to the point of asking that question, because there's so much to live for. There really is. Next one is, have you, been promoted, fired, cut, or passed over? This one says, you talked about before, what did you and others perceive or think of you is probably the big thing we deal with when it comes to being fired or promoted or cut or passed over. For me, I've been fired twice. I was fired as a head coach at Liberty University. I was fired as an offensive coordinator at Eastern Michigan. I've been cut 3 different times. Been cut from Denver, the Saints, and the Chiefs. So I've walked that road, and like you said, many times I've thought, oh, what's that person think? Or, and it really doesn't matter what someone else thinks. And that's where identity comes into play. As we understand our identity, those situations hurt. Obviously, there's emotions with them, but they're not who we are. They don't define us. Yeah. What about you, Austin?
I've been benched and I've been demoted, and it's very humbling, very, very, very humbling. And, your mind wants to go and think about, well, what is this person going to think about me? Or, how are they going to think about me in the future? And like you said, I mean, it's definitely something that I've had to work through. But, when we start to understand our identity and, that firm foundation, that's nothing more than a storm. It's nothing more than a storm, but it has taken a long time to get to that, for sure.
Here's one that many of us experienced. Have you ever been criticized or cussed, whether that be publicly or privately? I've done both, once again. And the worst part, it's been the cussed part, the openly criticized in front of people publicly, which is no fun for anyone. Had that happen in college as a coach. I can remember every Tuesday night just thinking, oh, this is going to be miserable. And then I had it as a player. And it was actually the coach's thought was that was going to make me better. He was one of the guys of the old days, great mind, brilliant, taught me more football than probably most. But he was one of these guys that got to break you down to build you up. And it about killed me.
As being a quarterback and a coordinator as well, I mean, I've definitely gone through those things. And, like you said, it's the dreading before those moments, and having to deal with him is probably the hardest. Probably harder than actually going through it, to be honest. It's the thought process that are going through your head. How am I going to respond to this? How, what is my breaking point? What can I handle in this? And you know, it's definitely something that I've had to walk through.
And we'll talk about this later as well, but words matter. Words matter, and they affect you greatly. They can either, we'll talk about, they either give you life or they bring death, one of the two. Here's one that I personally struggle with. I know a good friend of mine, we talked about this a couple months ago, that he struggled with the inability to look at Football Scoop or social media, because maybe you'll see someone again that, why they get it, not me. Yeah. And it's just not healthy for you. I couldn't watch pro football games after the draft in 1986 for a year, because every time I looked at one, it made me upset or mad. And a lot of my bitterness and anger, which we talked about a minute ago, was not at a person, it was at God. Why didn't it work out for me?
Yep. Yeah, it's that jealousy. You have what you want, and it's not materializing the way you pictured it. And for me, that it's hard to look at that stuff, because it just is confirmation that, hey, I'm maybe not as far as I want to be, or this person is elevating faster, and you lose focus on what really is important and true. The next one would be experiencing family tensions with spouse or kids. Has that ever happened for you?
Yes, and as a dad and with children, and it's not that you mean to have it happen, but once again, when these things are occurring that we're talking about, all these different questions that, quite frankly, they all have played a role in my life. That's why they're all on the paper, and many of them in your young career as well. And so I know it relates to people. But who do you end up taking it out on the most is the ones you love the most. And that's where you end up having issues with your spouse. You have arguments at times, even though you don't want to. Your kids are affected by the mood of the parents. So, yes, family tensions have happened in these 35 years of coaching, I should say.
For me, it's one of the common statements that, my wife will say is, you're here, but you're not here.
Mm-hmm.
I'm physically present, but your mind is either stressed about a situation that you're going to have to work through, or you're planning for the next, game, and you're thinking about plays or a way to beat this cover. And once again, back to the contentment question, is you're not where your feet are, or you're not where, looking and paying attention to those kids that are in front of you, or your wife who has been, serving your family. So yes, it's been something that I've had to work through, and I've experienced those tensions.
Another sad thing at times in this profession is we have a lot of acquaintances, and maybe you feel that, like, man, I got a lot of acquaintances, but I don't have a lot of true friends. And that is something that is tough to deal with at times too. So we'll talk about relationships as we move on as well.
Yeah, for me, it's you're so accustomed to being treated based on how you perform, you don't put yourself out there to be hurt by people, so you stay very surface level. So that's been something that I've done, and but we were called to be in relationship, so that's something I'm continuing to grow in. So we go through these questions, the how are you questions, because we know they relate to everybody in this profession, as a coach, as a player, and I'm sure they might maybe not fit in other areas, other occupations exactly, but I guarantee you work through some of these things. And, it's just important that we know how we feel and how we think. That way we have the ability to then take those things to the truth.
Yes.
So, as we move forward throughout this podcast, you're going to see how we take maybe these true feelings or these true thoughts, or how we're being perceived, and how we're going to try to rethink about how to live, or, live in those circumstances.
Yeah, we want to learn to live from a place of victory, that's for sure. Well, one of the exercises, Austin, that meant a lot to me back in, I guess it was 2006, and I shared in my last podcast, we shared about the ride was a major factor in my life. We had an exercise called the mask, and we tried to look at 3 questions as we did this mask exercise, and we also wanted to reveal the poser in our lives. And so I actually brought with me today, just to show you quickly, my mask back then. And I think you can see it here. It probably doesn't shock anyone. I picked the mask of a football helmet because the first question that we were challenged to answer in this mask was, what do people see? And so, for me at that time of my life, the way I viewed people looking at me was I was a football player, and that's why I chose that helmet. It was shiny. That's why I chose the Saints helmet. Like everything was good. And the mask, this black mask, basically showing darkness and guardedness. And, I didn't let people get close to me. I even think, that I tried to hide because I didn't want people to really know what was going on. And in many ways, I was an imposter. Some of the things that were important to me, I was going to bring them along with me today, but I said it'd be a little too much, is, I allowed things like my Letterman jacket, a football, the helmet, as I've already said, the game jersey, a championship ring, a trophy. These were the things that, I wanted people to see, and they really defined basically my identity at that point. What were some things you wanted them to see, Austin?
To be honest, I only wanted them to see what I'd let them see. I wanted to be in control. You know what I mean? Because if I showed too much of myself, or if I let them see, maybe my insecurities or my failures, they might not accept me. And I didn't trust, kind of how they would respond to that.
Well, for me, I said in one of those questions that acquaintances, we have a lot of in this profession, where they say they know somebody. And I do it myself. I say, I know him. But an acquaintance and knowing about someone is a lot different than having a relationship and truly knowing the person. We'll get into what it means to be known by God. It's a much deeper picture than some intellectual consent of, I know Joe Blow. And, but that's something that, when it's an acquaintance, they look at that exterior, what they see, or what, like you said, you allow them to see. And they say, that's who Ken Karcher is, who Austin Karcher is. And it's really not even close to who you are, because there's no relationship. They don't truly know you.
Well,
and that's something.
Well, for me, it's like, you feel like you constantly have to spin everything to make yourself look good. I mean, because, we didn't do this well because, this excuse or that excuse, or you look for reasons to blame someone else to keep your image or your social mask clean because of those acquaintances.
Yeah, that first question of what do people see is critical. The second question that we had to address is, what do I want them to see? And again, using my little illustration here of my helmet, you can see on the back, mine was gray, it was a broken heart, and it was behind a fence. I felt trapped. I was hurting. And I really wanted people to see that, but I didn't know how to let them see that.
Yeah, for me, it's like, I think if everyone's truly honest, people want to be known, and they want to be accepted for, what people know about them. But for me, it's that fear of being exposed and rejected once they know you that keeps you from allowing people to, truly know who you are.
In that exercise, we were also challenged to address our poser. There's a great book written by a guy by the name of Brennan Manning. I've read many of his books, but it's called Posers, Fakers, and Wannabes. And we were challenged to write this letter to our poser. And so I thought I'd share that with us, be a little vulnerable, and just read the letter that I wrote to my poser back in 2006. And it said, Since we were 8 years old, Poser, the crowd has been cheering us on, and the attention was great. We've spent many years reaping the benefits of a fake system alone. We built our life on performing for the crowd alone, wanting to be recognized. We've experienced alone many successes and disappointments in the arena of life. We always seem to bounce back alone from the disappointments in a way that made the crowd cheer. Not this time, Poser. We are truly alone. Just you and I. No more cheers from the crowd. No more recognition. Just silence. Wow, you faked me out, Poser. You led me to believe that I was it and that I could accomplish, control, or overcome anything. You lied to me, Poser. Your last scheme looked grand. You had all the props, the church, family, friends, football, ministry on the national stage. It looked like a dream, or better yet, a perfect fit. But I'm alone. Complete recognition, and then the nightmare, the perfect storm. I'm alone. I don't even have you, Poser. What is life all about?
Wow.
That was my letter to my Poser. You know, you could hear in that, what I really wanted people to come away with is that I was hurting and I was trapped. And so the third question that we were challenged with, first being, what do people see? Second, what do I want them to see? And the third is, who am I? And on mine, you can see the gold little sticker. And that was to symbolize that I had great value in Papa's eyes. I had worth. You know, I was shiny. I was, this special person that he created, and that was my true identity.
Yeah. I know for me, it's like I spend most of my time with, my identity being what I do or how I perform. But, as we're going to talk about, that is not our identity. And that's not where we need to live, to experience the life that we've been called for.
I've learned to say it this way, who I be. And it goes back to that section in Luke 15 where Papa never lost sight of his boys. They were always there with him, and they were known. They belonged before they ever were lost. And that's going to be a critical thought we talk about as well. Living out of your belonging preceded ever feeling lost. Well, Austin, you came up with a great logo. And as we transition from how are you and looking at the masks that so often we wear and the masks that we allow other people's masks to define us, you came up with this logo that I think really is a unique way to help us take the transition. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. So, how, I know not everyone's seen it yet, but once y'all see it, what it is it's a quarterback who's pointing to his head, with both fingers. You were a quarterback and I was a quarterback, and our favorite numbers were 12. So, we're wearing number 12 in this picture. And what we're trying to illustrate here is a change in thinking, a change in play, a change in, worlds that we're looking through, or lens that we're looking through. Because in the game of football, everyone who watches on Sundays, right? You'll see a quarterback come to a line of scrimmage, and at some point in the game, he's going to point to his head, and all of his skill players are going to point to their head as well. Well, for those of you who maybe haven't been around and understanding what that is basically an offensive coordinator gives a quarterback two plays. So the quarterback goes in the huddle and he calls the two plays. He calls the first play and the second play. And then when they get to the line of scrimmage, the quarterback is going to look at the defense or the circumstances that they're facing. Well, when they look at the defense, if it's exactly how they wanted the play to be, or to be, they're going to stay with the first play. If they look and they see that that they're lined up differently than they anticipated, then they're going to signal, hey, audible, audible, you'll hear words like can, like throw it in the first play in the trash can. You'll hear words like kill, kill, kill. Tom Brady was famous for saying alert with the Patriots. But all that means is, hey, forget the first play. We're transitioning and moving to the second play. So, to me, when you said, hey, we want to have this podcast, and I really like this word rethinking, well, that's what we're doing is we're trying to get people to rethink and to change from one way you thought to the next way you thought.
When I was in college back in the 80s, our coach had what was called a check with me system. Same thing. We'd get to the line and make the play. You made me think of something that is awesome when you used one of the words that they use, kill, 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 kill. That's the picture of the cross, because that's where sin died.
Oh, wow.
Papa killed sin so that we might experience what? The righteousness of him.
Wow.
And so kill, kill, kill. I like that. One of the things I want to talk, there's two stories, it makes me think of, we're trying to get people to understand story one versus story two, and the trueness of what God desired in the beginning. There's an author by the name of Alan Arnold, who I listen to, or not listen to, I read his blogs every morning, and I've read his book, The Eden Option, which I would highly recommend. But, he talks about having, which story you're living out of. Are you living out of the story where God is at the center, or are you living out of the story where you are at the center? And he just shows the comparisons of the two stories. And, so often we live out of that dualistic mindset of we got one foot in this story and one foot in that, but it doesn't have to be that way. And that's where, making the audible, that we hopefully will help walk through this with you, as you can have your mind changed and you can start thinking correctly.
We just spent a whole quarter talking about social masks, right? And what people see in us. Well, what God really desires for us is he wants us to take that, that social mask, which is not even, it's a portion of us, what we allow people to see. And he wants to filter it through the truth and his vision. Because what he sees and what he knows about us, because of who he is and what his son has done, he knows the entirety of our being. And he wants us to be able to move from that social mask, where it's only a portion of us, and bring out the reality and the fullness and the wholeness of our whole being. So,
another way that people refer to that social mask is a false self. And I wrote this note, that the false self counts on outside experiences to deliver inner meaning. We don't want the outside to define us. There is something inside who has already defined us that we want to be able to live from. It says in Colossians 3, my true self was what? Hidden with Christ in God. So we can enter a room and look at someone and say, oh, there you are. And that's what that whole awakening concept that we're going to talk about is, awakening to who is really in you. And I think that's going to be a fun adventure as we move forward.
Yeah, we're human beings, and we constantly are experiencing things that are coming from the external, and because of those what we are experiencing, we begin to feel things based on what we experience. And what we want to then do is take it and bring it back to the truth, and filter it back to the truth, so that we can then change the way we feel or the way we act based on what we think and know to be true. But so what is true about our identity? And so this next little portion is we're going to kind of talk about things that in the Bible that it tells that are true about us because of either what Christ has done or even way back in the beginning. So you want to take the first one, Dad?
Yeah. Well, anybody that knows me, my favorite couple chapters in the Bible is Genesis 1 and 2, and prior to that, and it says in the beginning. To me, it's common sense. Where do you start? You start in the beginning. And he said what? that he created us in his image and likeness. He said, let us create man in our image and our likeness. And so, we live from a place of kingship. We live from a place of his image and his likeness as we walk through our journey. And we'll talk a lot more in depth about that, but that's a great truth.
Yeah. Another truth that we have, it says in 1 Peter 2:9, it says that we're chosen, we're a royal priesthood, a holy nation, and a special possession. Well, all that, to me, obviously those are all very deep comments, but if you were to sum it all up, I look at it as you're valuable.
Yes.
You're valuable to him. So to me, anything that's valuable, that should give a strong identity to you when you understand that, hey, the creator of all things looks at me and sees value.
He tells us in John, in 1 John and John and Galatians, he says, we're his child. What else do you need when Papa says, this is my child? He chose us before the beginning of time. Before we were ever known in our mother's womb, he chose us as his child.
Well, obviously I'm a father and you're a father too. There's something special about, that father-son relationship. It's a very intimate relationship where, they can screw up and they're still your son. There's something unique about that child because they're yours. It says in Jeremiah, Galatians, and Ephesians that we are known, and it says that we're fearfully and wonderfully made in Psalm 139. To me, when I think of the word known, which is one of our, key words in when, to be known, that means good and bad. The good things about us and the bad things. When you're fully known, one of our fears of our social mask is that we're going to be exposed and rejected once you know me. But like we're going to see with the next point, that's not the case with our Father.
Yeah, we're accepted. It gets back to that belonging thought process. We already belong. We may not be awake to it, or we might not know it, or we may even put a stiff arm to it. But he's accepted us. And that's, again, that picture of Luke 15 where you see both brothers. He's accepted them and loves them dearly.
Yeah.
And the real thing, I just thought of this, Austin, too. The question I like to ask people a lot is, are you willing to accept your acceptance?
That's such a... You feel like it's just a play on words, but it's really the truth. Most people hate receiving gifts. They much rather earn the gift.
Yep.
So, another thing that it says in the Bible, it says we're part of the body of Christ in 1 Corinthians 12. And then it says our bodies are a temple of the Holy Spirit, 1 Corinthians 6. And the way that I think of it is, when we understand who we are and what he's done for us, and we accept that truth that his Spirit is now in us, and that changes the way we think and the way we speak and the way we, our heart, of which is our will, and the way we feel, we carry, everywhere we go, we carry God with us. And we are nothing more than a vessel just to pour himself out to other people. So, that part of being the body of Christ and a temple of the Spirit is we get to carry the very power and image of Christ. And we get to bring it to the world.
The other one says we're one in God. It's that union, and we'll talk about that because union is part of what kingdom is. And, it says in John 14:20, it says, in that day, you will know that I'm in the Father's in me, and I am in you. And to understand what has always been true, but to really be able to experience that reality on a day-to-day basis is what helps us understand and experience, which is another word we'll talk a lot about. It's the W of win, and that's wholeness. A friend of mine named Paul Young defines it, I think, very well. He says, what is wholeness? Wholeness is when the truth of your being, which you talked about the truth here, matches the ways of your being, the way we live. Are we living out of truth? And that is something that is, that audible. We got to get that check made. And the last is beloved. He looked at Jesus. The Father said to Jesus with John the Baptist, "This is my Son in whom I am well pleased. He is my beloved." We are the beloved. And if you break that word down, what does it mean? God's purpose from day one has always been that we are to be loved. And if that doesn't excite you and give you, some boost when you're maybe wandering through some of these thoughts, that's comforting. We are his beloved.
Absolutely. So
I want to just, talk about, this isn't just for men. This is from God is what we're talking about.
Yeah, so like in Colossians 3:23, it talks about how, we don't have to live our lives for men, right? We get to live from God, and what that is basically everything we talked about. We're judged by performance, we're judged by expectations, but when we make that audible, right? And we start thinking about, hey, I don't live for other people and their perspectives and how they perceive me. I live because of what he has done for me and who he is, and that is my identity. Well, what that allows you to do is it allows you to be free. It frees you up to not worry about other people and maybe what concerns them or what they view or how they view you.
Yeah, I mean, it's, we said that earlier that, we are in God through Christ. And one of the things that I know was really spoke to my heart over the last couple of years is you've heard this statement before that, walking in the light. And I never really understood, what does it mean to walk in the light? And it's so simple as the Spirit revealed it. It's basically living out of who God says you truly are. When we believe what Papa says is true about us, we're walking in the light. It's not something that we have to do or that we have to muster up. It's a gift from him. And so once again, it's that word from, living from what we already have been given by Papa allows us to walk in the light as we believe it.
Yep. So at this point, let's move to the fourth quarter, which, is Awaken Kingdom Culture, which is our call or our prayer that one that we first are continuing to be awakened to this kingdom culture, but also as we encourage others to live out of that as well. So the question that I'm going to present is, how does an identity built on the rock change the way you live? Because like you said in the previous podcast, if it's just something we believe in, but it doesn't affect us on, at 2 o'clock or 3 o'clock during the day, what value is it? Or what's the point? Well, for me, I think our identity being built on the rock, when it's built there, we're able to be free from the changing perceptions and expectations of people. I no longer have to please men, just like we talked about in Colossians 3:23 through 24. When I'm not worried about that, that frees me up to grow in other things.
Yeah, and as I mentioned a little bit in a roundabout way a minute ago, is just, we so often strive towards or for, and that's why we become tired and weary and brokenhearted. We strive versus living from him, living from the resource that we already have. And that provides rest rather than being tired and weary. So we'll talk a lot about and look at and rethink and discover, how do we live from all this that we have?
That's awesome. Well, I mean, so you have this freedom from not having to worry about what everyone's constantly thinking about you, whether you perform well or you don't perform well. What that then allows you to do is it allows you to focus on your true identity, which we talked about in the last quarter, which then helps us stay fixed and strong in a firm foundation. And then as we do that, we're able to experience the kingdom. Because when you're not wasting your time trying to, get people to be pleased with you, you have time to focus on other things. And what you get to focus on then is seeking first the kingdom. And like it says in the Bible, he doesn't disappoint when you seek first the kingdom. You will find.
Well, and like you said too, it's really about. I like the word you use to talk about this here for a minute for us, Austin. Is just it's circumstance proof.
Yeah. As a coach, we're constantly taught to develop your kids into being circumstance proof, where no matter what happens, we're going to look to overcome it instead of focusing on the excuse or what currently is happening. A perfect example is the other day in Kansas City. It's freezing cold outside. That's a legitimate excuse. It's there. But either you're going to overcome it or you're going to focus on that. And the team that does a better job of doing that is able to execute. Well, it's the same thing spiritually. We want to build that strong foundation so that you can withstand the storms of life, because we can't, like we said in the last podcast, you can't take those things. You can't focus on trying to stop the circumstances. You got to learn how to stand within them and still be who you are. And the only way you do that is you have to be firm in your identity and know who you are.
We talked about Nick Saban retiring at the beginning of this podcast, and he was big on that in his own way, because he always talked about live in the moment, take care of what you're doing right now. Don't look at the scoreboard. Don't worry about the fourth quarter. It's about living in the moment and living out of what you have already basically prepared or have as a resource that was given to you. Don't be worried about the things you can't control. And so, at the end of the day, it's an opportunity where Papa allows us to use our gifts that he's put in us from the beginning of time. We're all unique. We're all masterpiece, and use them as a tool to awaken hearts and minds to the real kingdom that is within, because that's where the kingdom is. It's that union. It's that oneness. And so as I was getting ready to close us out, Austin, in this podcast, I was thinking about, again, our title is Awaken Kingdom Culture. And so the question that's obvious is, what is the kingdom? And to me, it's when Papa meets all of mankind in the middle of our beautiful mess. That's where you find the kingdom. It's right in the middle of our day-to-day life, which could be messy, it could be great, but Papa meets us there. It's that union. I only do what I see the Father doing. Who said that? Jesus, right? He's our example. I was sharing with a guy the other day. I said, we make it hard. What did Jesus say? I only do what I hear the Father say, and I only do what I see him do. Well, that's a pretty good example then. Let's put our eyes on the Son, right? And the Son is within us. Today I heard a great definition of the kingdom. A gentleman by the name of Dub Alexander. I was listening to a friend's podcast, and this is what he said. I had to steal it, give him credit. I thought it was great. He said, the heart and authority of God from heaven on earth through us. That is the kingdom. The heart and authority of God from heaven on earth through us. We get to participate in this work for the benefit of all of mankind. That's the kingdom. We get a chance to help and see all of mankind change. And there'll be a lot of things we talk about the kingdom. So those three words, awaken, kingdom, culture. I challenge our audience to look at those throughout the scripture, to ask the Spirit to help them understand those things as we dialogue about this over the next weeks, months, and years. So in summary, I always like to say, how do you win? Because winning is really the only gauge a lot of people want to hear about. Well, here's what I think we will be able to help people think through as we help them win. One, wholeness. What is wholeness? Identity. What does it mean to be known? How do you live from freedom? And what does true growth look like? So, Austin, I enjoyed today with you. I think this is going to be a lot of fun. Any last thoughts as we wrap it up?
No, I'm thankful that you're my dad, and this just have an opportunity to be in conversation with you. This was great.
It's my honor as well, and we look forward to our next podcast next week. So until then, awaken kingdom culture.